Just wanted to show you today the floors on my '67 Mustang from California. They're the original floors, which is really amazing. Over 50 years old. And what's really nice is I don't have to cut any floor panels out and replace them, because all I have to do is these are quite a mess, is clean them up and preserve them. And I'm just doing it by sections because I don't have enough time where I could take a couple days and just do the thing complete. And when I have it down to the bare metal, I don't want that metal to rust. So I'm just going to show you briefly the steps I'm taking. Now what's interesting, the original stuff that apparently from the factory along your seams where you had your welds. See, there's a seam back there where the floor pans come together. So they just, some kind of machine, they just spray this tar-like substance down in a lot of places here, and they just really pour it on there. Now on this side that I've already done so far, you see I scraped it out. It was all around there, around the seat mount there, all back here. The reason I'm not leaving it is because over time, I mean, it served its purpose. It's kept this metal under here nice and fresh. But a lot of it, like here, you can see it's dried out and it's cracking. So although the metal is nice under there, I want to clean it up. And then what I'm going to do is, I've primed the floor, and then after that, this 3M auto body sealant, 8500. This stuff works really good. And what you do is you put it all along your seams where the welding is, and it'll keep moisture from getting in there. And you can just put it on with the caulk gun, and then you wet your finger and you can just smear it along there. And first of all, I mean, even though you'll never see it because it's under the interior, but I just kind of like the thought of it's neater. This is really messy. They didn't care at the factory because it's out of sight, and they just, going down the assembly line, they just poured that stuff on there. Now there's also another, you can see there, like this blob here is different stuff that they put on from the factory. This stuff is really hard. This seam sealer type here, it's rock hard, and I'm not going to bother to take that out. On the other side there, if you can see that big drip looking blob there, but that's stuff from the factory. That's real heavy duty stuff. So that's just going to stay right there. But along these other seams, like here and everything, where all this tar-like stuff is, it comes up easy. I just use a scraper and scrape that up before I sand down the floors. And then I'll put the seam sealer on there. Now I just want to show you what I've done for preserving these original floors. It's very important, the surface preparation. So, after you sand everything down as best you can, clean everything up with, I've got sanding discs and wire wheels and things. It's ideal if you can just take a car out and have it sandblasted, but I'm not in a position to do that. And then just do it all at once. So anyways, what I've done is, let me just show you what I'm using for surface preparation. Very important. Now I've got this stuff from POR 15, and after you've done all your sanding and cleaning up your rust with your sanding discs and wire wheels and that, then you use the cleaner degreaser to get the surface nice and clean. You rinse it off with water, then you dry it. I use a combination, you know, take some cloths and wipe it up, and then I've got a heat gun, and I'll just dry it up real good before I do the next step. Then the next step, you take this metal prep, and what this does, first of all, it removes the rust from the metal. The chemicals in it will, you know, chemically kill the rust and remove it. And then it etches the bare metal. It'll etch it so that your paint will stick. So very important. And then rinse that off thoroughly with water and dry it. And then now you're ready for your primer. Now it's nice under the seats is one of the few places that, you know, if you desire, you can hand paint it. What I've done is I've used, after I did my surface prep, as I mentioned, I've used Rust-Oleum Rusty Metal Primer. You know, this is a good heavy-duty primer, and you can brush it on nice and thick. And one of the advantages for me with that is, as opposed to the spraying, is any of these seams, you know, there's a lot of them where the floors are welded together, your seat rides are welded. You can put the paint on nice and thick and get it right into the seams there, whereas spraying, you know, you're not going to be able to work the paint into those corners as well. So I really kind of like just hand painting that on there. Now what I'll do after I mentioned, you know, after I put my seam sealer, that's the next step. Put the seam sealer on there on all your welding seams to keep the moisture out of there. And then this 3M sealer, you can paint over that. So the final step for these floor sections will be, I'm going to go ahead and paint over the primer with the Rust-Oleum spray paint, the black, and spray that over the primer. That way I'll have the nice protection of the floor. Now the one other thing, so these sections were really nice, but especially the front sections in front of the seats, maybe on this side too, the surface rust could be a little heavier, and so in those sections I'm going to use the POR 15. I'm going to do the same preparation steps that I explained, you know, for these sections, but instead of using the Rust-Oleum primer, I'll use the POR 15 right over the, you know, the bare metal after I do the surface prep. And then, even though they say with the POR 15, as long as it doesn't get ultraviolet light, you know, the sun's not going to hit it, it'll be okay without a top coat, and so under the carpet it'll probably be okay. But I'm going to go ahead and do the extra step because I'm going to do the seam sealer on top of the POR 15 in the sections where I use it, and then I'm going to put a top coat. I'll just use the Rust-Oleum black. I'll just spray that over the POR 15, and I believe I'll look at the instructions again, but the POR 15, it dries real hard as a rock, and you probably need to do a little surface prep on it, as far as, you know, sanding it, you know, lightly sand the surface to rough it up, and then I'll spray the Rust-Oleum black over the POR 15 black. So the floor then, I mean, these floors are 50 years old, in good shape still, and so that'll preserve these floors indefinitely. But very important to keep the moisture out of the places where the rust can start on these floors, because once it starts, if it's let go, it's amazingly how quick these floors can disappear. My first car was a '65 Mustang. This rear floor section right back here, when I got the car, it was a little over 10 years old in western New York, you know, driven in the winters and the salt, and there actually was a significant hole under the carpet back here. just in that short a time, just in a decade, and these floors will just disappear. You know, the sheet metal really not protected, not that thick. And so back in those days, what we did was common. They had sheet metal, you know, at your local auto parts store, and you just got a sheet and your tin snips, and you would just pop rivet a section in there under the carpet, just pop rivet in there, and then you would throw some undercoating on it to protect it, and then you were good to go. But I just say all that, it just shows you how vulnerable this metal is. Now, this car was in California, and so these floors are original, over 50 years old, just amazing to me. And so it's nice just to go ahead and preserve them. But you don't want to ever let the rust get started, because I tell you, on these cars, they can just disappear. And so as long as I'm in here, I'm going to do it right.